This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
They were the kidnappings that captured Iowa's attention, the disappearance of paperboys Johnny Gosch and Eugene Martin. But as the state focused on them, another missing child went relatively unnoticed. In 1986, 13-year-old Mark Allen planned to walk to a friend's house, but he never made it. There were few clues back then, and 24 years later, police still have very little to go on. Channel 13's Aaron Brilbeck has the story.
Mark Allen's mother admits her son had been a handful. He had been shifted back and forth between his mother's house and his father's house in Minnesota most of his life.
And it was hard because he had been living with Dad for a while and then came back and lived with me, and younger brother and older sister were real close, and he wanted to be in there in tight.
But Mark Allen never seemed to fit in, often getting into trouble. On March 29, 1986, the evening just before Easter, the 13-year-old left his home on Southwest Emma Avenue to hang out with friends, maybe take in a movie. And that's the last time his family ever saw him.
He walked out the door, and the kids were getting ready to have pizza. And I'll never forget it as long as I live. The last thing he said to me as he walked out the door was, "Save me some pizza, Mom. I'll be hungry when I get home."
Nancy Allen says she watched her son walk down the sidewalk, past the bushes, and then he was gone.
And he waved when he got to the bushes, and I waved at him, and that was that, and I never saw him again.
The next morning, Mark's mother realized her son didn't come home and knew something was wrong.
It was Easter Sunday, so I thought, well, maybe he went to Grandma's, knowing Grandma would have an Easter basket there for each of the kids. So I called my mom, and he wasn't there. Had phone numbers of different ones of his friends and called all them, and no one had seen him. He didn't even show up where he was supposed to be the night before.
Ellen says she called police, but they told her they couldn't do anything for 48 hours. Days turned into months, and no trace of Mark.
And then in the months that came, the police checked in Minnesota, where his dad was. They checked in Connecticut, where his paternal grandmother was. And there was nothing.
Ellen doesn't know whether her son's disappearance was linked to the disappearances of Johnny Gosch and Eugene Martin, but she says police seemed reluctant to help her because of the other missing teens.
I got this distinct feeling that they did not want parents to be frightened to let their children sell newspapers or do different things.
I know that detectives followed up on several leads that did not pan out. We're not able to locate him, and he's still listed as a missing person.
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children age-enhanced Mark Allen's photo to show what he might look like today. His mother says she doesn't know whether her son is alive or dead, but after 25 years, she says she'd like to know for sure so she and her son can finally find peace.
There are times when the news says that they've found a body, and they're not sure yet how old it is, but they're pretty sure it's male. In one instance, you hold your breath and bite your fingernails and hope that it's not your child. And in other ways, you wish that they would come out and say that it is your child, so you could finally bury them and go to rest.
Aaron Brilbeck reporting. If you have any information about Mark Allen's disappearance, please call Des Moines Police. And to learn more about cold cases around the state, look at iowacoldcases.org. We've put a link to that site on our website, whotv.com.
Welcome to another episode of True Crime XS Season 2. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. Okay, so the cases that we're talking about today, there are two of them, and they both took place within about a 4-month period in Albia, Iowa in 1984.
Right, and it's really interesting to me that we landed on them based on sort of the research we're doing, because what happened was I was looking at the I think they're pretty well known cases of Johnny Gersh and Eugene Martin. And sort of in the research for those cases, those are the newspaper route boys, for lack of a better term, that went missing early in the morning as they were on their newspaper routes. And it just so happened that in the middle of between Johnny Ghosh and Eugene Martin, I came across Harry Milligan's case.
Harry Dennis Milligan, a 21-year-old Marine Corps reservist, went out with friends in Albia, Iowa, on Saturday night, June 30th, 1984. He was last seen in Albia's business district between 3 and 3:30 a.m. Sunday morning, July 1st, 1984, and later reported missing to the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. Witnesses said Milligan was last seen traveling north on Main Street in Albia, and at that time was believed to be en route to his family's home in Avery, where he failed to show up. Milligan owned and was driving a maroon 1977 two-door Pontiac Grand Prix, which had current 1984 Iowa license tags, plate number EIJ 244. He was described as a 6'1" white male with brown hair, blue eyes, weighing about 160 pounds. When last seen, he was wearing a blue plaid shirt, blue jeans, and white tennis shoes. His family posted a $500 reward for information about his whereabouts, and they distributed posters nationwide. Milligan's father, Leonard Milligan, said in a January 8, 1985 Monroe County News article that some rumors had been checked out, but nothing definite had shown up to indicate Harry's whereabouts. Losing our daughter, who died the month after Harry disappeared, hurt. But we know where she is, and we can't bring her back. We've done all we can to locate Harry, and now we just sit back and wait. We don't know what else to do. I don't know what I'd do if I wasn't working. Neither Milligan nor his vehicle have been seen since the night he disappeared under suspicious circumstances, and the Iowa Department of Public Safety officially classifies Milligan's disappearance as involuntary, which defines a person of any age who is missing under circumstances indicating the disappearance was not voluntary. For example, an abduction or a kidnapping. Strangely enough, on Tuesday, July 17, 1984, the Monroe County News, under scheduled fines, listed the following: Harry Dennis Milligan, Albia, failure to use headlamps when required, $22. Plus costs. In November of 1984, as an expected 250,000 pheasant and quail hunters and some 20 to 22,000 trappers prepared to venture into some of the state's streams and most remote areas, officials urged them to keep eyes open for clues to the disappearance of 3 young men. In addition to Milligan, rewards totaling $125,000 had been offered for information about Eugene Martin, who disappeared from his newspaper route in South Des Moines on August 12, 1984, and Johnny Gosh, who vanished from his route in West Des Moines on September 5, 1982. Persons with information were instructed to contact either the Monroe County Sheriff's Department or the Des Moines Police Department. According to the Union Republic, officials said that hunters and trappers could constitute, in effect, the largest search party ever put afield. Additionally, wildlife biologists and Iowa Conservation Commission officers were expected to be out in force to help game wardens with law enforcement. Experts estimate that if hunters and trappers in the 5 states around Iowa were alerted to look for the 3 missing boys, that the potential search party could swell to more than 1 million persons. None of the 3 boys has ever been found. Harry Milligan was born October 4th, 1962, and in 2021 would have turned 59 years old if he was still alive.
Because there aren't a whole lot of cases in that area around that time. And I believe I looked into that real quick and I made an assumption. My assumption was, based on my experience researching, one of the details of Harry Milligan's disappearance was that his rather large vehicle was missing with him.
In order to better cover this case, we decided to talk to Mark Milligan, Harry's brother, about Harry's case.
How is the weather out there?
Oh, actually, today it's great. It's been like 70 degrees today, considering about 2 weeks ago it was minus 13 out. So
that has got to be a wild change. Yeah,
it is. I mean, the snow's gone, everything's melting off real quick, and yeah, it's like night and day.
You know, we went from 13 degrees every day to suddenly it's 65.
Well, that's great. Yeah, like I say, it's just kind of a strange deal because that's, like I say, it's kind of what it done here. Just jump from one to the other.
I actually have seen you recently. I was able to see some news clips of you.
Okay.
Related to this case.
Yep.
So this case is fascinating to me. This was not, I didn't come across this research on my own. It's actually someone who works with me brought it up. And it was just on the beginning of a timeline I was looking at over in Iowa. It didn't really fit what I was looking for, but because of their interest and reading about the case, and I saw that you're making, it looks like as of like last year, you started making a bigger web presence about the case.
Exactly. That was kind of the mission, I guess. I had a gal come to me, and that was the whole thing. I usually about once a year, birthdays or, when you come up missing, those type of things, I'd throw something online and kind of my thoughts and opinions and stuff. And, for a month, you'd probably get little bits and pieces or at least get people asking questions and stuff like that. But then it normally just fade away. Like I say, when she come out and talk about let's start a Facebook group to try to get it back to life and actually keep it going. So, and what's it been, 5 months, 6 months now, 5 months, I think. And it definitely increased the awareness, I guess, more than anything.
Now, there's also a website, findingharrymilligan.com. Is that you as well?
Yeah, that's Michelle. Michelle Floan is the gal that got a hold of me. She kind of does. She's the technical one. She does all a lot of the site stuff and set up the website, the Facebook group, that type of thing, and kind of does all for me. And I just do trying to gather all the information I can and trying to put enough out there here and there to keep everybody's interest piqued and keep people talking.
Now, are you the younger brother?
Yes, I'm a younger brother.
There's something really interesting about this case that struck me right away. You and Harry are both adopted.
Right. Yeah. He was adopted. I guess the easiest way to explain it is I'm adopted by my grandparents, and my grandfather had adopted Harry during his first marriage, and then just shortly after he adopted him, he got divorced, married what I know as my grandma. And like I said, we were pretty much raised as brothers. My mom and dad kind of had some issues, and the best thing for me was to go with my grandparents, and I just ended up from probably the age of 2 on staying with them. And Harry had, when I came there, I was probably 2, he was 5, and we were just raised as brothers our whole life. So
that's interesting from a number of perspectives. You end up with sort of almost like a melting pot from birth mentality as far as the family part goes, but you may not have even known that. You were just brothers.
Yeah. We knew, I knew from a very young age that, I was adopted by my grandparents, and I knew he was adopted. But like I say, I don't think it ever really had any effect on the two of us, just because we didn't know any different. We were always together, raised on a farm out in the middle of nowhere for the most part. So we were brothers, best friends, and sometimes enemies with each other. You know how that goes when you're older brother, big brother type relationships when you're young. But we just never knew any better. And anybody that really knew us going through school knew us as brothers. Nobody knew that he was adopted, and nobody knew that I was adopted. So, but we knew, we knew, but nobody else did. There's a lot of people. I've posted on the site here a thing a while back just to kind of clarify everything. And heck, I had people from my class that I went to school with, and people from his class will get a hold of me and say, "This is the first I ever knew that." We both played the sports. That was, probably the main thing with both of us. We were both big in sports. The big difference was, unfortunately, he was very, very smart. Almost kind of freakishly smart in a way, because, he could open a book, look at it, and go take a test and get an A, where I could do the same thing and, get a C, if that. So, he was very, very smart up until, I wouldn't say up until, but, I don't know really what went wrong when he went to college, because that was part of some issues that was going on at the time that he came up missing. Is he was having issues at school and having some bad grades, but I think it was that typical, you're 20, 19, 20, 21, getting your priorities straight of, do you want to party and run with the guys and chase the gals, or do you want to get good grades? And unfortunately, I think the first year he had there at college, he didn't quite get his priorities too straight. So I can't say I wouldn't have done the same thing. I just took a little different route. I went directly into full-time Marine Corps, where he had went to the Marines and was a reserve, and using some of the advantages through the reserves to go to college. So,
well, how long were you in the Marines?
I did 7 years in the Marines.
You're a Marine. He is a reservist, but he's still a Marine.
Yep.
And the night that he went missing is in 1984. Were you already in the Marines at that time?
Yes, I was stationed in California. I'd left. I went to boot camp in September. I got out of boot camp in December, came home for a short period of leave then, and then went back to San Diego, where I was stationed at. So I'd been basically in San Diego for 7 months, 6 months when he came up missing.
He went missing on June 30th into the morning of July 1st that year.
Yes.
And there are sort of general accounts available. In your perspective, do you feel like the accounts of that and sort of his activities that night, as far as they are online, do you feel like they're accurate?
No. I guess, what I've put on there, like on the group page and stuff, I think most of that, there's a timeline on there that I believe is fairly accurate. And that's what I've been trying to establish the most, is trying to establish the facts of that whole evening, to try to get to the point that nobody seen him again, to figure out, I guess, his whole demeanor at the time. For the most part, I'm getting is, he was in a great mood and had won some money playing cards. So as far as the accounts, that's, I guess, the biggest issue of the whole case, in my opinion, is there was 3 individuals that were last with him. They all gave very, I guess, brief accounts of basically just, hey, we rode around, drank some beers after the bars closed, dropped him off at his car, and nobody ever seen him again. And then, over the years, a couple times, a couple of them have been asked to recall that evening. The accounts have kind of changed a little bit, so that's probably the part that bothers me the most, is trying to figure out what's the truth and what's not the truth, in that whole night after 2:30 in the morning, I guess.
There were 4 people sort of involved with him after he's last accounted for. And one of them, I couldn't get a sense of like where he was in it all, but that's the city officer, Popcorn is what they call him.
You're right. Yeah. Larry Jones, Popcorn. Right. Yeah. Like I say, and like I say, Larry was one of the officers working that night. There was actually 2. One of them was another a gentleman by the name of Tom Morgan that I've been friends with for a long time and was in Harry's grade and actually a close friend of Harry's. He was the overnight officer that night, and I've spoke with him, and his account of that evening is that he never even saw Harry that night. But Larry Jones, who I guess by what I know of the police department, probably would have been working an earlier shift, with the latest possible shift working would have been like a 7 o'clock or 7 at night till 3 in the morning shift, which then puts in question of why are you seeing him at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning getting dropped off? So, I mean, there's just a lot of different things with Larry Jones that really concern me. I mean, I worked with Larry. I was a police officer for 21 years, and I worked a short period of time with Larry in Albia. And we did have a conversation, I know of at least at one time, that he, had told me he thought he saw him being dropped off. But since then, it seems that his recollection of the events of that night have changed multiple times as far as I'm concerned, and just different things throughout the night that have been brought up, like a traffic stop that supposedly happened at, somewhere around 7, 8 o'clock at night, right on the main drag, I guess you call it, or the main street there in Albia. people say we saw him stop Harry, and he don't recall it, and says, and his response to me was, well, if I did, it was completely professional. And I just, being an officer myself, that's just, to me, is a very strange response.
So, but that incident, if I understand it correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that occurred before he really kind of met up with the guys that went out, right?
Right, sure. Yep, that would have been, like I said, that would have been 7, 8 o'clock at night. The 3 guys that were last with him all say that, they weren't even with Harry or hadn't, been with Harry until after, the bars closed, sometime around 2:30 in the morning.
And he had been riding with one of them, and the others were, the way I understand that is they had all been driving around together, and
sure.
But they were in Steve's car, and that jives with your account, right?
One of the stories, yes.
Okay. So,
yep.
So it was Steve, Doug, and Jeff that were together with him. And supposedly Jeff was the last one to see him. Is that right?
Well, I think Steve is the one that's made it very adamant that he let Harry and Jeff off at their cars parked by the library, so that meant both their cars, and that he saw Harry, and as he backed out and went to drive off, he saw Harry pull away and drive down the street in the opposite direction. So, to me, I think it's Steve that says he has the last actual visual of Harry's car, at least, going somewhere, at 4:30 in the morning.
Okay. And I had wondered, because the reason I said Jeff is because Steve says he drops Jeff and Harry off.
Right.
But I didn't find an account where anything else addressed Jeff. So in my mind, the two of them were left in the parking lot and they saw their cars go away. But
sure.
I guess that's why I think of it that way.
And the like I say, the other situation of that is if you look at a statement that I think it's even on the website there of that Jeff Adler gave 10 years after the account. He clearly states in there that he was in Harry's car and that Harry was driving and he got out of Harry's car. So that's where things start to really go kind of crazy.
So at that point, when Harry leaves that's where the mystery begins in this.
Yes. Oh, exactly. I mean, as far as the real mystery starts, like I say, once Harry was supposedly dropped off, that's where, it's a complete mystery at that point.
Okay. So it's been a long time. This is, we're coming on 40 years now.
Yeah, it'll be 37 this year.
Do you remember when you first heard that Harry was missing, sort of how that information came to you?
I think the Sunday morning when my mom started looking for him, she had called some friends and stuff, and I believe it was either later on that evening, maybe. I'm pretty sure she'd called me out in California just to see if I'd heard from him. And, I'm typical, I'm 18 at the time. I'm like, no, I haven't heard from him. And, we didn't, when you don't have cell phones and all that stuff anymore, I'm like, I haven't heard from him, haven't talked to him for a while. I'm like, she told me, well, he didn't come home. So I was kind of, looked at it from a young guy's perspective and said, don't worry, he'll probably be home in a day or two. He's took off partying with somebody and just hasn't, sobered up or whatever, to get hold of you or come back. So I really never thought nothing of it, other than just, typical going out and probably overdoing it a little bit. And then I think it was by that Friday, my first sergeant called me to the office and, basically told me that my parents had contacted him that my brother still hadn't, come home, that they wished that I would come home. So they had all the arrangements made. The first sergeant actually had leave papers drawn up to where I could come back here and work out of or be attached to the recruiting office in Ottumwa, Iowa, and stay back here looking for him. And they provided my plane flight. They did everything. I mean, and by I think it was Saturday, I was home.
So
yeah,
they really worked with you on that.
Yeah, they did. I will never forget that they put me on what was, what they call, it's called emergency leave. And they took care of everything. I mean, I didn't have to do nothing. I just, basically all I had to do is make a flight. And he even, had one of the guys that I was stationed there with and friends with, he had pulled him into the office and asked him if he could get me to the airport, So, I mean, they went above and beyond to get me home, that's for sure.
When you got home, you end up, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, you end up becoming a police officer.
Yep. After I got out of the Marine Corps and was back here, my wife, she ended up being a 911 dispatcher, and that kind of got me associated with some of the police officers around here, and became friends with them. And a couple of them were like, "Well, you ought to test." So I ended up testing and becoming a police officer. So not something I ever thought I would have done, but I mean, like I said, I spent 21 years doing it. So
something must have set well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely, it was a great career, and I enjoyed the heck out of it. I don't know that I want to be still doing it nowadays with everything going on, but it was a great job.
So along the way there, one of the local sheriff's detectives, he might have actually been the sheriff, Denny Carr.
Yep.
So he was investigating or supervising the investigation into Harry's disappearance.
Yeah, he was the sheriff at the time, and then once he was no longer in law enforcement, he went on to I think he actually went to a job with the state of Iowa, where he was, I think, investigating like pharmacies or something. I'm not really sure on that one, but I know it was a state job. He went on to that, and while he was doing that, he also opened up a private investigator practice.
And he continued to investigate Harry's case.
Yep. He was very good friends with my family, and I considered him a good friend. He, it was one of them things where the way Denny always put it is, it was there was one of two cases in Albia that he had worked, as a sheriff and hadn't been able to answer, and he was dead set on figuring them both out.
And he has passed away as well.
Yes, he has. Yeah, he passed away a few years ago.
Your parents have also passed away.
Yes.
And in the 90s, they ended up having to get some formal papers drawn up related to, I think it was 8 or 9 years after his disappearance, related to declaring Harry dead. And it was very hard on them, I think.
Right. Oh, that was terrible. I mean, probably one of the worst things I ever watched was my dad had to sign off on those papers, because in his mind that was, I don't think it was ever final, but it was at least on paper, it made it final, I guess. And that was something he just, never could really come to grips with, I mean, like I said, for a long time, after my mom had passed, he still lived in the same house where we lived at, and spent most of his time, 20 miles away in the town in there, because he's a big VFW guy and that type of thing. So he was in there a lot and always talk about maybe moving, but then he would never move, because he'd always tell me, well, if I move, I might be gone when Harry comes home, and then he'll leave again, and it was just, I think he had it stuck in his mind that, Harry was going to come home someday, and he needed to be there to make sure that he didn't leave again. So it took a long time to ever convince him to actually leave our house and move to Ottumwa, which he eventually did. But, at first he was completely dead set on leaving.
That must have been that. I can't imagine what that would be like for you, watching them go through that and having, your own measures of grief as well.
Oh, like I say, I guess me, after a period of time, you always, even today, I can't say I don't have hope that Harry's out there somewhere and things change and he just left and decides to come back. Yeah, do I hope that's what happened? But, you learn to deal with reality that's most likely not the case. And I think it was, probably a little easier for me to deal with than of course, parents, because, I know my dad, especially, he couldn't talk. I mean, up until the day he died, you couldn't mention Harry's name that he didn't have tears in his eyes, trying to talk about him, because you could tell it just bothered him that much. I couldn't imagine living with that.
I did notice, I was just kind of checking in on the status of this case, and it looks like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on the dates, but it looks like Monroe County has reopened this.
That was my whole goal with getting the website going, getting the group going, was to try to, for the longest time, it was a missing persons case. Bits and pieces of information would come up. I'd pass it on to other law enforcement, because I never wanted it to be a conflict with my job when I was in law enforcement. And, they kind of look into things and then it'd die off again, or whatever lead they had would not turn out to be anything, and it would die out again. So when we got the group up, on Facebook and got the webpage going, that was my whole intentions, was that I thought that there was enough suspicion over the years, with the different information I'd been told and the things I was getting, to basically push them into the fact of opening it back up and taking a whole new, look at things and looking at new information and getting people to talk and finally, after a few months, I kept talking to the sheriff, which I've been friends with for a long time, and he finally decided that he was going to get the Division of Criminal Investigation to assist, and they actually have opened it back up as a criminal investigation. So
yeah, I saw that. And so when it comes to a case like this, and you were a police officer for a long time, it's one of those. You sort of have to pick a path that you want to go down and follow it as long as you can. If that doesn't work out, you have to sort of back all the way up and start over with different possibilities of what might have happened to a missing person.
Sure.
And it looks like, so, just speaking in general terms, when people disappear, it could be that they disappeared voluntarily or were temporarily gone. And it could be that they, went away to harm themselves, but those two possibilities here seem to have been, I don't want to say ruled out, but they seem highly unlikely, and the families always sort of believe that those two are highly unlikely.
Right. Oh yeah. I don't think anybody in the family, I can't say that exactly. I would say initially, there was, I don't know if it was the fact that people maybe believed, the family believed that's what he done. But that was the best case scenario, rather than having somebody, hurt him or him hurt himself. So, I think for a short period of time to start with, the family wanted to think, okay, maybe he got frustrated enough with things that he just took off somewhere. But, after a period of time, you start thinking, okay, there's certain things that he wouldn't have missed, or at some point you would come to your senses, I guess, because I guess what I always relate that to is I know when I was 18, 19, or, even younger, probably even younger, there's times you get frustrated, you get mad at mom and dad because you can't do the things you want to do and different things. And you're like, I'm taking off. I can't wait till I get to the point of, where I can make my own decisions and do my own thing. And some kids kind of do that. They kind of go off and do their own thing for a while, and then they come back to reality and come home. But a lot of times they never really lose complete contact with everybody they ever known. So I think after a while that went away pretty quick, and then it was just a matter of what's the other possibilities. With the limited amount of information that was gathered when he did come up missing, that's probably what made it tough to really do a lot more, you know.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense, I guess, but
it definitely does. It limits, like, when you go back to that beginning point, you don't have a lot of other paths to go down now because information was lost time-wise.
Right. And the other thing, you know, like I've said all along, the other thing is, you know, he was 20, 21 years old, and nobody took it serious. You know, the family took it probably more serious than anybody, of course, because, you know, we're confused and don't know what's going on. But for the most part, with that age of a adult or a person, people think that, well, it was voluntarily, you know, it was voluntary, and they took off, and there was something going on, and they just wanted to leave. And I think that's what really damaged this whole thing that's made it last 37 years. And they took three guys' stories and never questioned them, you know, didn't he? I mean, if you look at the, you know, the case file of things, they pretty much just let them, here's what I know, and it was left at that. There was nothing ever questioned, you know, because they were supposedly friends.
Right.
You know, so it didn't lead. I mean, there was no place else. I mean, you know, now it probably took, I'm going to say, God, I don't know how long it was, at least 10 years or better, before I ever really got a piece of information that I felt was that led down the other avenues of foul play. And then, of course, you know, going back and being a police officer, dealing with everything I did, the old sheriff, when I worked there in Albia, gave me the case file that they had, what little bit they had from when this all started to look at. And once there was a story, you know, or a possible event that took place, it made me start looking at all that even closer, and then starting to realize that, wait a minute, things are just not adding up, you know, and that there were things that should have been done that weren't done, you know, as far as, you know, questioning guys and doing different things. And, you know, that's kind of where we're at now is like you say, we're still somewhat chasing that, you know, rabbit down the hole. But at least some of the things are starting to piece themselves together, at least in my opinion, I guess.
Well, so there is, strangely enough, as you know, we're referencing this case being almost 4 years old, 37 years old coming up, bits and pieces of information that you and others have been able to start putting together to sort of explain why the guys were parked in a library parking lot at that time of night, and that there might have been, you know, this after-hours party, so to speak.
Right.
You know, that would have been very helpful in 1984 to have known. That we can build a witness list. But,
right. You know, and that's where I mean, I hate to say it, being law enforcement myself for 21 years, you know, I ain't gonna say I ain't never made mistakes or anything like that, but that's where the real problem lies is like you say, nobody ever even considered that. You know, they never considered anything other than what they were told, you know, and I don't think enough questions were even asked at that point of, you know, typically nowadays, I guess if I was looking into something like that, I want to know where you've been, who you've been with, and, you know, throughout the whole night, not just, okay, we were together, we dropped him off and watched him drive off into the darkness.
And that's another interesting aspect of this. It's not just Harry that's gone. Harry's car went with him.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's a 1977 Grand Prix that come up missing. That's not a very easy car to hide. I mean, it's
a large car.
Yeah, I mean, it's as big as most trucks nowadays, really. I mean, and that's the other thing. There wasn't a lot of them around back then, and where do you hide that? I mean, it just that's the other part that's just hard to believe is. I get it. There are, scrap yards and different things like that. But the word of Harry being missing and his car being missing got out pretty fast for the most part. So, I would think anybody would have really thought twice if all of a sudden somebody's showing up with this 77 Grand Prix to get rid of it. I think somebody would have at least maybe questioned that, hopefully.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where you run down, okay, so he's at a card game, he wants some money, the night went wrong, was somebody mad that he won a little money from them? Did he hit on the wrong girl? There's a lot of little things, but he doesn't seem to have any really, this is so cliche, but he doesn't really have any enemies. It's just got guys he sort of hangs around.
Nope. I mean, other than what could have been created that night, which leads back to a card game and individuals in the card game. And they're, that's where we got to the whole, Mike Stalker, the owner of the bar, and him being a very, viable suspect of doing something. And then you start looking into his history, it becomes, it starts to maybe draw at least maybe a little clearer picture of what could have happened that night. Whether it did or not, that's still yet to be determined, I guess. But it definitely starts putting, people in the crosshairs of being suspect.
It does. It gives it certainly opens up more avenues for those paths we were talking about.
Right.
And, we always run down, I think I sent you a picture of what they were looking at. They run down avenues of, could it have been an accident and would it have been found? Is there a likely location? And I mentioned to you one of the ponds in the event it was an accident. You said that someone had side sonared that pond before.
They did it early on, and of course the equipment was not the greatest. And then I think it's been done once. They did it once before here just recently again. But there was vegetation in part of the bottom of it where it's deep enough to hold a car that they couldn't get a clear picture. But I know in fact, I just got off the phone with the sheriff probably 10 minutes before you called, talking about as soon as the ice is off here in a couple of weeks, we'll be searching it again now that there'll be no vegetation and everything, and be able to get an absolute, saying whether there's something in the bottom of that pond or not. Me personally, I just know from when I came home and set out to try to find Harry. Of course, that was probably the first place I went. It's like, okay, let's start with the normal route home and start, in-depth checking all those areas. And if you actually been there and see the layout of the land, is it a possibility that his car could have went into there? Yes. I mean, there's no doubt, but I mean, it would have to have been at such a high rate of speed to leave the road with no skid marks, no sliding through the grass, no going through a fence, that's there, or leaving any marks of any sort. I just don't see it happening. Stranger things have happened, I guess, but, that's the first place I went. I walked, all around the ditch, the road, everything, looking to see, okay, is there any kind of a mark here that would indicate, a car leaving the roadway and traveling into this pond? And I just, never did see anything.
And that's one of the details that it's hard to get on a case that's got this much age to it. We're lucky enough to be able to talk to you, ask that question, so that even though it's still being considered, we know somebody looked at it, followed that logical progression.
Sure. And that's kind of where we're at now. We've been working with the DNR officer here, Mark Flaming, and the sheriff. Even when we first started the page, I got with him, and then when he'd done some on his own, and I did at least one with him so far, and we're planning on doing some more. Just going around to all the public-owned waters, like we did the Albia Reservoir, the Country Club, and those type of places around here where a car could be easily, drove off into, and check them. Just doing the isolating everything, going down a checklist. Checked here, nope. Checked here, nope. And we're going to continue to do that. As soon as the weather allows, we've got some other places that, have come up of interest, or have just been places that, people come and say, hey, you ever think of here? Because it would be easy to drive a car in here, and if a landowner will let us on there to search, we're going to search it just to continue to check things off the list.
I hate to even ask this, but I'm going to, because you're law enforcement. You've developed a gut over the last 20 years that tells you like when things line up and when they don't. In this case, are you getting that kind of gut, or are you too close to it with him being your brother?
Me personally, I think the person that killed my brother's dead. I honestly, okay. Mike Stalker had a very long history, and then I'm finding out more, every day about his personality and his behavior over the years. When you put together the facts of a card game and money being lost, and a history of beating other people, and leaving them for dead when you've lost money, and those type of things, and some other just general information I've learned from people that associated with him, he would be my number one suspect, and that's my gut feeling. The biggest thing I think to finding the answers to that and to finding Harry is, I don't think that that didn't happen by one person. One person did not kill my brother, did not get rid of a car and him all by themselves with nobody else having any idea of what happened. So that's kind of where I'm at now with everything. My stories I've put out there, or my opinions that I've put out there based on what I've learned, all point in that direction. And, that's just, if I'm wrong, like I said, I've been asked a million times, well, if you're wrong about which I try not to accuse nobody, but just, suspect people. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize when it's all said and done, but I'm going to look into every one of them. That's just, I don't think anybody else would do any different if it was their brother.
No, I agree with you 100%. And I think the best way to phrase this is you're just looking at all the possibilities that sort of lend themselves to explaining what happened to him in order to gain the closure of knowing, where did he go and what happened.
Right. And that's I've made it pretty clear, I've come to live with it over 37 years. I'm not out for vengeance. I'm not out, seeking justice, I guess. If there's justice to be had, I'm not going to say that that shouldn't happen. But that's not my mission. My whole ideal is I just want to know where he's at and bring him home. That's give him a resting place that he deserves, and go from there. With whatever happens from that point on.
And so I want to mention again that you have findingharrymilligan.com. Which has a discussion page. It has a way that people can get involved and look at these resources, but also they can, donate and assist to what's going on. And they have ways to contact you and to find your Facebook page there, I believe.
Yeah. And then, like I say, we got the Facebook group, which is Harry Dennis Milligan Still Missing. Pretty easy to search and find that, and it's got all the information on it. Like I say, we've got a reward set up through donations, which, is right now is strictly a reward as far as information to locating him, and the car. Other than that, I mean, if it don't get used for that, the reward money's all going to, I guess I can't say because I have nothing to do with it other than helping raise the money. But we have a board of people that's in charge of it, and whatever they decide at that point, a memorial type thing or something like that, then so be it. But mainly, it's set up just for a reward.
I have one more question about this, and
Sure.
This is from that interesting aspect that we talked about, like at the top of the interview. If remains were to be found, have they kept DNA from Harry specifically in order to do that? Because I know there's no, like, one of the things that was going on here is you guys are sort of looking for the birth family as well, right?
Right. We have. I know the sheriff's department has opened up his adoption records. I know that they've submitted touch DNA that came from a friend of his that he was in contact with, a gal that he was in contact with when he was in the military. They was very close friends and corresponded, letters back and forth, and she kept all those letters and the envelopes. So all of that has been, submitted. Everything's in the process right now. And for two reasons. One, when and if we find him, we're going to need the DNA to make a positive identification. And the other part is to put it into the system. There's a huge DNA database right now on John Doe's, all over the country. And it's to be able to put it into there to make sure that it ain't a case of where he, left here and ended up someplace else and has been a John Doe somewhere for a long time or whatever. But at least that would clear that up. And it's like I was just talking to the sheriff, just like I said before I talked to you, and I told him, I said, I really it kind of sounds bad, but I said it would be so much easier if that was the case. You put his name in the system and find out, he's a John Doe in another state, and this whole situation is at least over for that part of it,
Yeah, that it at least gives you a story and a conclusion.
Exactly, and that's the main thing is just finding closure, and that's that's been my whole mission from the start is to get to that point of having closure, and all the is trying to get everything out there because you just never know, who's going to be that one person that maybe has a piece of information that fits with something else and points us in the right direction because. Like I say, since we started the Facebook group, I mean, the amount of information I've came up with is, it's unreal. I mean, it really is. I know more now than I did for 36 years, just because of social media and technology, the ability for people to instantly communicate. I mean, I've had people come to me and tell me something thinking that I already knew, and it's like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? I didn't know that. And they're like, well, I thought you did. And it's like, no, that's why I always try to push to everybody that, any little piece of information, if you know it, tell somebody, tell me, tell the sheriff, tell somebody so that at least it's known, and it's not just something that you think everybody knows.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I do hope you find him. And my co-host Meg, she couldn't be here for the interview, but she her belief is that like she wants everybody to find their way home,
exactly,
wise or otherwise.
Yep.
Is it before we close out? Is there anything else that you want to say about any of this case?
At this point, like I say, I know we're actively looking at some places to search. Some people, some of the information is pointed to certain places, and right now it sounds like we're actively working on and maybe going to get permission to search some of them properties and different places. And like I said, the main thing to me is thanking everybody for keeping it alive, getting the word out. And like I say, if you think you know something, get a hold of me.
A special thanks to Mark Milligan for joining us today, and you can find his information in the show notes.
And so I immediately go to the water story, which is you and I kind of share the theory, I believe, that a lot of times in a very high percentage of cases where a person is missing with their vehicle, they are in water somewhere. It's very difficult to sort of get rid of a car with no one noticing. Now, I did not look really deep into this case. I literally took a look. There were some details in the circumstances of his disappearance. And basically, it was like he was going from this area back home to this area. And I picked out where I felt like he went in the water. And I circled it and I sent you the screenshot of it. And I'm like, this guy's here. But it just so happened that while we weren't aiming towards this case, because we're looking at clusters of cases that occurred, and this one happens to be in Iowa, but we're kind of bouncing back and forth from Colorado and Iowa. It just so happened that this case just kind of got some momentum, and it's been opened back up. So the disappearance of Harry Milligan has been opened back up, and his younger brother is leading a charge to figure out what happened and hopefully to bring Harry back home. And like I said, we were doing something else. And I just can't resist reading cases that it lined up time-wise, which is how I ended up on it. It really had nothing to do with the other stuff that we've been talking about and that we're kind of headed towards, but we can't resist this situation as far as the fact that it is open. There is a family member who is actively pursuing the case. And I feel like everybody, deserves the opportunity to be put to rest and to know what happened to their loved one. And because of that, you were able to talk to Harry Milligan's brother. And I had the opportunity to take a case that I just sort of made an assumption about in a passing glance sort of way while researching these other parameters. And we kind of got a little sidetracked, but I think it's sidetracked in a good way because this is something that, it could actually make a difference.
Yeah, I think it could too. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to bring Mark Milligan on and talk to him. I felt like there was momentum in this case, social media wise. And as you mentioned, they're reopening the case to take a look at it. The reason we were looking in this area is because I had tracked back a few Colorado cases to see if they had early ties to Iowa. So it's even it's like right at the beginning of the time frame I was looking at Colorado for. But there's an unsolved murder and a missing man that take place. So the unsolved murder is in February of 1984, and in July of 1984 is the missing persons case. What we're doing today it's a little different than what we do, but you mentioned something, and I want to bring it back up. When we look at a missing persons case, we sort of do a gut check on a missing persons case, like once we've read as much as we can find. And that gut check is this person someone who voluntarily disappeared? Is this walked away from their life? Is this a suicide? Is this an accident? And those accidents include lost in the wilderness. They include cars that go into water. And if we sort of can't look at a case, even if we do look at it and get a gut check, we'll still look further. But if we look at a case and it pretty much screams one of those things, we don't go a lot further. This case has some elements that we feel like there could be an accident path, like that could definitely have happened. But there are some other angles on this case, and that's what we're exploring is, like, what is it going to take to bring some resolution to this case? And I think that's what Mark Milligan is also trying to do.
I agree. And I feel like I wasn't able to participate in the interview, but I was able to listen to it. And, you know, bless his heart. I feel like it is, I hope he gets the closure that he's looking for. He certainly sounds like he deserves it. And he feels like he's a very genuine person who, you know, he misses his brother and he wants to do, you know, a brotherly thing in seeing this whole thing through. And to the point where, you know, there is an end to it. And so after I did my brief look, now, of course, I sent you that screenshot. Just, you know, I send you a lot of things that I typically wouldn't just put out there because I don't want to be insensitive. And I wasn't trying to be insensitive. I just felt like we talked, you know, recently about the cases that are open, but not really because nobody's looking into them. And this sort of flew in the face of that because I felt like it might be a missing person case. And I believe that Mark pretty much confirmed it wasn't taken seriously enough at first because of the circumstances of Harry's disappearance. Just without so much time passing, without it being 37 years later and not knowing like that the outcome was still going to be up in the air this far in the future, it could have very well been, you know, a young adult male just leaving or just going off for a little bit. But I think at this point in time, it's pretty safe to say that that's not what happened. I don't even see, from just what I've read and what I heard with your interview, I don't even see where anything that could have driven him away from his life is even still around anymore. So there would be no reason that he wouldn't contact his brother and let him know. So I always feel like, you know, vehicles have to go somewhere. And there's been other sides of the story. Now, it seems to me like just from my first, he's gone in the middle of the night with his car while he was headed home, my first sort of logical assessment, and I believe it would be everyone's logical assessment of that, is, you know, he could have, I don't know if he was intoxicated. It really doesn't matter. He could have been tired, you know, whatever. And that would lead his vehicle to leaving the road and ending up in water. And the path that I felt like he took, there were a couple of obvious places. And I believe you addressed that in the interview, and that it has been looked into, maybe not thoroughly enough to completely discount that. But there are plans to go ahead and get it to the point where either they find something or they completely discount the theory, which is, you know, that's something that I like hearing because I feel very strongly that that could be a direct path to closure. And I'm so glad to hear that Mark, Harry's brother, has resources that it appear are being devoted to doing that.
Absolutely. And that was sort of the point of getting that case out there. I do want to address the February case as well.
Timothy Charles Ernie, 29, was found dead in his 322 North 8th Street, Albia home in Iowa on Thursday, February 2nd, 1984, by his live-in girlfriend, Dorothy Kemp, 45. He'd been shot twice in the head. According to Kemp, Ernie drove her to work at Kendall School at 7 a.m. and was supposed to pick her up at 1 p.m. When he didn't show up, Kemp said she walked home and found Ernie lying on the living room floor. Investigators quickly centered their attention on Kemp's estranged husband, 48-year-old Harold G. Kemp. Mrs. Kemp had lived with Ernie in Albia after leaving her husband just over 1 month earlier in late December. Papers filed at the Wapello County Courthouse in Ottawa show that Mrs. Kemp told investigators her husband had threatened to kill Ernie and was in the victim's house on at least one occasion while armed with a handgun, the Des Moines Register reported on February 16, 1984. State medical examiner Dr. Thomas Bennett conducted Ernie's autopsy and reported Ernie died from a gunshot wound. Kemp also told investigators her husband threatened to throw a gasoline bomb through the window of Ernie's home and made various threats on Ernie's life in the presence of several witnesses. Monroe County Sheriff Dennis M. Carr said in a statement filed with applications for search warrants. On January 1st, Harold Kemp, a laborer and carpenter, also told his estranged wife he could get rid of Ernie anytime he wanted to. Reported by the Register's Nick Lamberto. In the application for warrants, officers said they were looking for information pertaining to written documents associated with murder, suicide, injury to other persons, as well as dynamite and ammunition, clothing, rubber gloves, and various firearms, rifles, shotguns, and handguns. On February 4th, Carr obtained 3 search warrants for Harold Kemp's property. Carr later requested and was granted a 4th search warrant. Officers indicated they were looking for guns, ammunition, and clothing, as well as various other items. In the application for the 4th warrant, officers said they were looking for boxes of cleaning supplies and toilet paper addressed to the Kendall School, where Mrs. Kemp worked. The Albia Union Republican reported February 16, 1984, that according to reports filed Tuesday with the Wapello County Clerk of Court, items seized included ammunition, clothing, papers, a gun, cleaning supplies, toilet paper, and trash bags. The Wapello County Sheriff's Department and local police, along with agents of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, assisted the Monroe County Sheriff's Department in executing the search warrants. In one search warrant document, Sheriff Carr said investigators were seeking to match bullets in a gun with the head wound that Ernie had died from. They were also trying to find a rubber glove with a finger missing, since a rubbery substance believed to be the finger of a glove was found by the body. Magistrate Samuel K. Earhart signed the warrant shortly after Ernie's death. James Mitchell, superintendent of the Albia Community School District, confirmed Ernie worked as a school bus driver and also helped deliver hot lunches from Lincoln Middle School to 3 elementary schools. On the day of his death, Mitchell said Ernie drove his school bus route in the morning but failed to show up to deliver lunches at 10:30 a.m. Mrs. Kemp also worked for the school district as a custodian at Kendall School. Mitchell said she hasn't returned to work since Ernie's death, and he did not know where she was. When the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, or the DCI, established a cold case unit in 2009, Ernie's unsolved murder was one of about 150 cases listed on the cold case unit's new website as those that the DCI hoped to solve using the latest advancements in DNA technology. The DCI remains committed to resolving Iowa's cold cases and will continue to work diligently with local law enforcement partners to bring the perpetrators of these crimes to justice for the victims and their family. If you have any information about Timothy Ernie's unsolved murder, please contact the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation or contact Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
What you can hear there is the case of Timothy Ernie is his name. And Timothy Ernie just happens to be in the same town that Harry went missing from. And I noticed, like, when I pulled the case files on this and some of the opinions related to it, one of the officers who was mentioned in the interview, Larry Jones, he thinks there could be some kind of correlation between Harry's disappearance in July and the previous murder in February. And I just don't see it. Did you see anything there that made you think those were related?
No, I didn't. The only thing that perhaps the law enforcement you mentioned had more access to something. However, I feel like it is a very clear difference. The only thing I see there is a small town that didn't have a whole lot of crime having a murder and then a guy go missing. And they were both young adult males. But no, I didn't see any. I don't see any similarity between the two.
No, I didn't either. And I could be convinced otherwise. Like if we were to happen across 3 or 4 more of these that sort of across Iowa back into some of the neighboring states, and it was always either a shooting or a missing man, and it happened all in the same year or 2 period. That's something where I would be like, okay, well, now we take a look at that. But there's a strong suspect in the Timothy Ernie murder, and it's a complete miracle that no charges have been filed there. And I try to keep an open mind, particularly when it comes to defendants, because I don't want people to be convicted of crimes they didn't commit. But I do like crimes to be solved.
Right. I don't even want them to be charged. And I wonder, so we previously talked about cases that are open, but not really. They're cold cases because nobody's looking into them, because literally the only thing that has not happened is the person that everybody knows who's done it hasn't been charged. So, those don't gain a whole lot of traction. And that's just from what I have available to me, that's how I see this case. It's just everybody knows who did it. They just haven't been charged.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely one of those type cases, at least through the eyes of law enforcement in that area.
Most of the time it boils down to a confession in those types of cases. And which I don't necessarily agree with tactics we often see that law enforcement take to get confessions from people who otherwise they don't have enough to arrest them. Because I feel like that gets, for one thing, it puts law enforcement into sort of a bullyish like position. And, I don't feel like that's right. But I guess in some ways you could say, well, it's no worse than someone killing someone else. From this particular case, it's my understanding, there were components of the case that actually they make the person from their own actions seem guilty. If that's fair to say. Now it's a kind of a third party account of it, but there were threats made and things like that. And so it's not like there isn't a good reason for the suspect to be a suspect. He made himself a suspect.
Right.
According to what, it's not like there's a completely innocent person who, somebody came up with it. But it is one of those cases where if you don't have law enforcement that's going to push and somehow get the information or get a confession, essentially, it's not going to be solved. Where's the justice in that?
Exactly. And so there is some irony in that case with the lead suspect. And I'll just leave this article right here and people can think what they want of it. From the OttawaCourier.com. On October 10, 2008, reward offered for assault information. Harold Kemp thought he was going out to show one of his rental locations to a prospective tenant on Thursday morning. Sure enough, there was a man waiting for him when he arrived, but he wasn't interested in living at the location. He hit Kemp in the face with pepper spray, then struck him. He left with Kemp's wallet. Now Kemp and longtime partner Therese Brown are asking the public for their help in finding the assailant. The couple is offering a $1,000 reward for anyone who can identify Kemp's assailant. There's a $200 reward for anyone who returns his wallet and driver's license. Brown said police are investigating. They haven't heard anything back from the authorities yet. It's similarly slow in getting phone calls responding to their ad in the Courier. Brown didn't have any good leads early Friday afternoon. Anyone with information is encouraged to contact the Ottawa Police Department.
I agree. I believe that is, I feel like it's ironic.
So these cases sort of are leading us back into next week. And next week, what we're going to take a look at is some of these, I'm going to call them paperboy murders. We're not looking at a lot of those, but they come up sort of in the course of what we were doing here, including Eugene Martin. But before we close out like this segment, I know this has not been like a lot of us talking or a long time here, but is there anything else that you can think of about Timothy Ernie or Harry Milligan that you want to say?
Well, I would just say that I have a lot of hope for Harry Milligan's case getting solved. Personally, I feel like the search of, and I don't even know the name of it. I just looked on a map. I feel like a search of that water, it could be just really helpful. And I'm not saying that it has to be that. It's just, I sort of would need to know for sure that he's not there to kind of push forward. But in the event, hopefully you'll be able to link this to all the other stuff they're doing as far as looking for people who know what happened the night Harry disappeared and that kind of thing. And, if you don't want to go to law enforcement and you don't want to contact Harry's brother, you can contact our show, because I assure you that John will get the information to where it needs to go. And
even anonymously.
We can ensure we will ensure your anonymity in the event that, I don't know that would be a comfort to anyone, but the point of us putting this out here is it was something we came across, and it's a real thing that is there's movement behind it, and we have a family member who really wants to know what happened to his brother and to bring him home. And anything we can do to help with that, we are more than happy to do it. And I really hope that the case will get resolved, and I hope it'll get resolved soon, because I think 37 years is long enough.
Yeah, and if you guys know anything about the Timothy Ernie case, I would encourage you to, report it to Crime Stoppers out there, report it to the Iowa Cold Case website. All of the websites related to the cases that we're talking about today, you can find those in the show notes. You can just click on them and go straight over to the Facebook groups or to the landing page websites. Definitely, it is time that some of these family members get either justice or closure or both.
I agree 100%.
Thanks for joining us. You can reach us at 252-365-5593 or at truecrimexcess.com or truecrimexcess@gmail.com if you want to send us a note. This episode was brought to you by LabrottieCreations.com. That's LabrottieCreations.com. Check out the merchandise and specifically their fun Pop Pet art custom pieces made from photos of your very own pets. Use the promo code CRIMEXS, that's CRIMEXS, for 20% off a fun, brightly colored, happy piece of art of your own pet at their site, LabrottieCreations.com. Music in this episode was licensed for True Crime XS. The theme song was Indestructible by Noah Smith. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform or at TeePublic, Instagram, or Twitter. You can also join us on Patreon to fund future body exploration trips. But the best thing you can do for us is leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform and share us with your friends. And we'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
From the Washington Post on March 9th, 2021. Written by Bill Baxley, the Attorney General of Alabama from 1971 to 1979, in a signatory to an amicus brief filed March 9th, requesting a new trial in Jefferson County Circuit Court. As a former Alabama Attorney General, I do not say this lightly. An innocent man is on our death row. I have long believed that some crimes are so horrendous as to demand the penalty of death. As the Attorney General of Alabama in the 1970s, I led the effort to bring back Alabama's death penalty after the U.S. Supreme Court ended capital punishment nationwide in 1972. As a lifelong defender of the death penalty, I do not lightly say what follows. An innocent man is trapped on Alabama's death row. His name is DeForest Johnson, and Alabama must not execute him. Johnson's murder trial was so deeply flawed, the evidence presented against him so thin, that no Alabama citizen should tolerate his incarceration, let alone his execution. This is why I have joined 8 former Alabama prosecutors and 2 former Chief Justices of Alabama in calling for Johnson's conviction to be set aside. In my opinion, 2 standards must be met to warrant capital punishment. First, the crime must be sufficiently heinous. That certainly applies here. Jefferson County Sheriff's Deputy William Hardy, wearing his uniform, was shot in the head and killed shortly after midnight on July 19, 1995, in the parking lot of the hotel, where he was working his second job as a security guard. However, the second prerequisite has not been met. Before putting someone to death, we must be absolutely certain of their guilt. In this case, the facts point to the outright innocence of the defendant, Johnson. No physical evidence links him to the crime. Multiple alibi witnesses place him across town at the time of Hardy's death. The only witness against him was paid $5,000 for her testimony, which was that, while eavesdropping, she overheard someone she thought was Johnson admitting to the crime. The defense was not informed of this payment. Most shockingly, though, the prosecution presented 5 completely different theories of who killed Hardy at different court proceedings. I first learned of this case from my son, an attorney who had heard about it from a colleague. Over the course of my career, I had received many requests from people wanting me to speak out against certain executions. I couldn't help them because when I looked at the facts, I found the crimes to be heinous and the accused to be guilty beyond any doubt. I assumed Johnson's case would be the same, and at first I ignored it. My son persisted, though, and when I finally examined the facts, I was so shocked that I could hardly believe that this had occurred in our state's court system. In my 56-year career as an Alabama lawyer, only twice have I discovered that an innocent man was sentenced to die. The first case was that of Clarence Norris, the last survivor of the Scottsboro Boys, 9 black teenagers accused of raping 2 white women in Alabama in 1931. I was elected Attorney General almost 40 years after Norris was sentenced to death. Convinced of his innocence, I lobbied then Governor George Wallace to pardon Norris, which he did in 1976. Johnson's case is the second time I've been moved to take action. I know most of the people involved in this case, including judges and attorneys on both sides. I believe them to be good people. Somehow, though, this case came off the tracks. Good people sometimes make serious mistakes, but it's not too late to correct them. Jefferson County District Attorney Danny Carr, whose predecessors in the office prosecuted Johnson 22 years ago, spent nearly 9 months reviewing the facts of this case, talking to witnesses and consulting with the family of the victim. He concluded last June that Johnson deserved a new trial, and he asked the court to grant one. Now, so have I. Before I became Attorney General of Alabama, I was an elected district attorney, so I understand Carr's responsibility to pursue justice. If I were the district attorney, and I were presented with the facts as we now know them to be in Johnson's case, I would not seek to authorize charges. If I were a judge presiding over a case with these facts, I would not let the question of guilt go to the jury. If I were a juror and I heard these facts, I would not vote to convict. Given where this case is now, if I worked for the state of Alabama and there was anything I could do to correct this injustice, I would do it immediately. I have never known anyone in Alabama's courts or law enforcement who would knowingly go along with executing an innocent man. But unless Johnson is granted a new trial, we risk doing so. This would be an offense against all citizens of Alabama, even those who, like me, believe in the death penalty.
Just keep climbing, just keep climbing, just keep climbing, just keep climbing, yeah, just keep climbing. I look around at Johnny, I think it's time to blow this down. So just keep